Welcome to today's episode of the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. Want to increase your financial IQ with today's episode? I have a guest, Bill Downs, who I've known now for, 16 years, or give or take. Very, very good friend of mine, great guy. And we're going to talk a little bit about his journey to retirement and what he has learned here as he's a couple of years into retirement. So Bill, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Chris, appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, I thought maybe we could start, and I have a little bit of a sense of this given some of the discussions you and I have had over the years, but give us a description, a little bit of what kind of home did you grow up in? Was it a wealthy family, poor, middle class? Kind of set the stage for us.
Sure. Middle class, one of 7 children. My father was a radio engineer for WTIC. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So we had a roof over our head. We had meals on the table, but there's many times my mother would have to time his check to when she wrote a check for the grocery store type of thing. So, we very middle class, didn't have a lot of extra money. My father hustled for a buck. So I think, growing up, we appreciated the dollar, right? So there wasn't any throwaways or times that, we were buying frivolous things. So I think that's where my conservative roots come from.
So with one of 7 children, where were you in the sibling lineup?
I was in the middle. So I used to get pounded on by my older brothers, and then I would pound on my younger brothers. So that, I was right in the middle. So one cool thing about being a middle child is the older children break all the barriers for you. So it makes things a little bit easier, but I do think you learn things, right? Hopefully you learn by some of their failures. And so you don't repeat those yourself, although I repeated many, so.
And given this middle class household and probably kind of crazy with 7 children running around, what did you learn about money? What are your remembrances, some of your first lessons about money when you were young?
Because of our upbringing, we were always hustling for a buck, right? So I always had a paper route. And on my paper route, my customers, I would either mow their lawn or shovel their snow or whatever. So, we were always, out there hustling for a buck. I think the one big thing I learned by having, a little bit of money was the importance of saving, right? So I was always a big saver. I'd save for a baseball glove, or I'd save for a stereo or something, where other people, they'd be buying the sodas and the candy, and every day they'd be blowing their money on these small little items where I would save for bigger items. So that's one thing I think I learned growing up, and the fact of the value of a dollar.
Was this lesson, the hustle, explicitly taught to you by your father or perhaps your mom? Or is it something, Bill, you would describe more that you just learned from observing?
No, I learned from my parents that if you want something, you got to earn it, right? So, I could have my brother's hand-me-down baseball glove if I wanted to, but if I wanted that brand new Rawlings, that had to come out of my pocket. So I think that's where we learn is if you want, what you put into is what you get out of it, kind of.
That's well said. That's well said. I love the paper route. My first job was a paper route. And I know if you're listening to this and you're from a younger generation, 52, Bill's a bit older, is, paper routes have gone the way of the dodo bird, right? Nobody does paper routes in today's modern world, but what a great learning experience. And I assume, Bill, you had to collect, right? You actually went out on the route and collected money from your customers?
Yep. So we had every week we had to go and collect money, and we had little tickets we would give them for when they would give us the money. But that also gave me the opportunity to meet them. And so that's where I got to mow my lawn. So I had a little lawn business with my customers, along with shoveling their snow and stuff. So you kind of built a relationship with them.
There you go. Good stuff. So let's fast forward quite a bit, quite a bit. You recently retired from corporate America. You had a very successful career in corporate America, a great run. I'm curious, how did you decide it was time to retire? And how did you balance out targeting when you want to retire based on age and life circumstances, combined with the financial part of things? Can you walk us through a little bit of your mentality in the lead up to retiring?
Sure. So one, it was planned, but I'll tell you where that planning came from. When I was in college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so, it's the summertime, gonna get ready to register for courses. And I'm reading in the paper, I'm all looking to help wanted ads. Hey, make $100,000, right? So I kind of fell for this. Let's make 100,000. So I decided not to go to school. This is going into my junior year. I decided to go to work. So went to work for this company. Believe it or not, I was selling insurance door to door. It was health and accident insurance for a company called Combined Insurance.
All right.
And the person that was the head of that actually established Combined Insurance was a gentleman by the name of W. Clement Stone. And W. Clement Stone had written a book, The Success System That Never Fails. And one of the prerequisites of being hired by that company was to read his book. And it's the best thing I ever did. And there's two learnings I will share with you, Chris. One is, if you see something in life that you like, be it someone else's behavior, someone's commitment, something that somebody does or something has, try to assimilate that into your own life. That was one. The number two thing was always pay yourself first, right? Regardless of how much money you make or whatever your bills are, you always pay yourself first. And the example that he gave in his book was, if you saved 10% of everything you make, and back then, if you were getting a rate of return of 10%, you would double your wealth every 7 years. So, of course, I'm there kind of figuring all that out, but that was probably the one thing that really struck me, was always pay yourself first. So when I actually got a real job, when I was working for Wang Laboratories, and I was working for them for a couple of years, started working with them in 83, I think it was either 84 or 85, they came in and they introduced the 401k plan, right? So I'm sitting in the audience and saying, holy cow, you mean, and at that time I was a single guy, so I was getting beat up pretty bad on taxes, but I could save up to 15% of what I make, right? So there's paying myself first. And you're going to match 50 cents on a dollar, which I'm getting free money. I mean, that really set the tone for me. So when I think about the plan, that was the start of the plan, right? So it's long-term, you pay yourself first. I think the second piece of it is, once you establish a plan, you stick with the plan, meaning that if I'm saving money, that money I'm saving is what I can afford to lose. So I'm not going to save money and then all of a sudden say, oh, I got to make a mortgage payment. So I'm going to take the money out of my investment and maybe buy high and sell low, right? I don't want to be in that situation. So, invest only what you can afford to lose, but stick with the plan. And I think for me, that those tough years of 2007, 2008, 2009, I never varied from my plan. I stuck with it, right? And as you know, hey, things come back, everything's a cycle. So I think for me, that was kind of the key for me. The keys for me was pay yourself first, have a plan, stick with that plan, but also make sure whatever you're investing is the money that you can actually afford to lose.
So I love that, Bill, because if we combine that with the lesson that you learned early on about the value of work and work ethic, the hustle, the value of a dollar, and then you combine it what you learned through the book, I mean, that's more than half the battle to be financially successful. I mean, if you could just do those couple of things and cut out all of the other complexities in life and priorities and noise, I mean, those couple of things alone will get you very far in the wealth building process, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. And, and to your original question, we really plan for the long haul. And then for me, when I think about retirement, Chris, I really wanted to balance where would I be financially versus where am I from a health perspective, right? So I'm a healthy guy, thank God. Love to exercise and all that type of stuff. So I wanted to make sure that if I'm going to have that long-term plan, that I can make sure I can enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? The last thing I want to do, and unfortunately you see people that save. They keep working. They're working into their, late 60s, early 70s. Then they retire. They only got a couple of good years to enjoy it. Unfortunately, they come up with some catastrophic disease or something, right? So for me, I was healthy. We looked at it. We kind of planned things out, long term, and so we could afford to do it. Could I have stayed another 3 or 4 years? I was at the peak of my income. Yeah, I absolutely could have. And could I be sitting a little bit prettier than I am? Absolutely. But I think you just have to balance that with what you want to get out of life. And, what I want to get out of life is, enjoying time with my wife and my kids while I'm still healthy.
So was it a combination of a little bit of how old you were combined with some financial benchmarks that you wanted to get to?
Yeah. So there was a number I wanted to hit, which I hit. And then I just had to look at it to say, hey, if I'm going to maintain this between the date I retire, and I always put 95 as my date of, hey, if I'm going down, hopefully I can make the 95, right?
Okay.
So, it's basically, 30 plus years that I know that my investments and between Social Security and pensions and all that type of stuff, I can, I've attained a certain lifestyle, and so I can maintain that lifestyle over the next 30 years. I think that's important too, is, you want to establish a certain level of a lifestyle, and you want to make sure you can maintain that in retirement. And so those are the important things. And Shelley and I sat down, we looked at those things and said, yeah, we think we can do it. So.
Now, I'm glad you brought up Shelley because I wanted to ask. Now, Shelley didn't have a traditional corporate career. I think early on when the kids were young, she left the workforce. Similar to my wife, Joelle, was the traditional, I don't know, homemaker, if you will. I know that's a little bit of an outdated term, but you're in the corporate world, you're making a good living, you're planning retirement. And I think probably knowing you and Shelley, you do more of the how much we're going to invest, how much we're going to save, where we're going to put it. How did you and Shelley organize the decision making around retirement? Did you actually sit down and lay some out on the kitchen table, or how did that kind of play out? Can you share with us a little bit how you worked it out in terms of husband and wife kind of thing?
Sure. So yeah, we did. We sat down. We kind of went through things. She trusted me quite a bit because we would sit and we'd go over it, and I'd kind of work with her, managing her portfolio, because she did, to your point, she was in the private sector for a while, and she did have a 401k plan. So we kind of worked through that, and we kind of sat down and put paper to pencil or pencil to paper, and yeah. And kind of laid that out and said, hey, this is where I think we're going to be. And I used some very conservative numbers as far as return on an investment, when we walk through some of those things.
So it was, and I could appreciate this because it sounds similar to how Joelle and I mostly operate with her. I do more of the tracking, more the day-to-day decision making, and then she and I will sit down occasionally. I'll explain what's happening and kind of get her buy-in and her viewpoint, which is not always the same as mine. And then we kind of talk it through, and that's kind of how we work it. That sounds kind of similar, right?
Very similar, Chris. And I think the other thing that's really important, God forbid anything happens to me, she really needs to know where our assets are. So I always kind of lay all those things out. So if anything ever happens, she knows where it is. She knows who to contact. So it's kind of for me, there's two benefits there. One is absolutely want her input. And there's a number of times she's made some suggestions and I said, wow, why didn't I think of that? And then number two, that other benefit is, God forbid something happens, she knows where everything is. And in fact, Shelley and I went to the Philippines this past winter. And before we left, I actually sat down with one of my daughters, so they know where everything is, right? So kind of laid out where everything is, account numbers, passwords, all that stuff, made sure that they were on, like I always do multi-factor authentication being from the security field, right? So to make sure that they're on there if they have to dial in and that type of stuff. So I think planning is important, but making sure you have things well documented. So not only you and your spouse know, but God forbid something happened to me and Shelley, the kids know where everything is too. And I know that's a very touchy subject for some people. We don't get into the fine details of exactly what the numbers are.
That's right.
But at least they know where everything is.
Right. And I think that's very well said, Bill. You don't need to say, perhaps even in a conversation, you might not have said how much is in your 401k or how much is in the bank account, but at least they know the infrastructure, the inventory of here's where you need to go and look. If you needed to step in an emergency, in some type of crisis, that they would not be starting with a complete blank piece of paper, because that in an already stressful situation makes it so much worse on the people that are loved ones that are in a position to help in a crisis if they have no information to go on. That's a really tough way to go about it.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Because, you do all that hard work, and not only do you want to maximize the benefits, but you want your family to maximize the benefits, right? So, I actually got burned on that. I luckily had inherited some money at one time, but no one could find the cost basis for one of the investments. And I must have paid, I don't know how many thousands of dollars more than I should have had I had that cost basis letter,
So share with us, how long ago did you retire?
It'll be 2 years in August. So it's been 22 months I've been retired.
Has it been easier than you imagined?
I highly recommend it. Let me say that, Chris. It's funny though. I will say the first 3 or 4 months was different. I was a guy that I was in the office 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. I wouldn't normally get out till 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and if I went to the gym, I wasn't home until 10. So in the beginning, I was a bit anxious. Like, hey, I should be doing something. But once it kicked in, I've really enjoyed it. And, it's very important to have routines, right? So as you know, I'm big into physical fitness. I joined a golf club, a country club after I retired. So I got a lot going on. I always say, I laugh with my friends. I don't know how I had time to work. I've been so busy. The one thing is I have had a lot of job offers as far as consulting and board of directors types of stuff. But unfortunately, in my profession, it's the cybersecurity profession, you got to be on top of the game 7/24. So if you're really going to add value to either the customer, or if I was a large corporation and I was on their board, I'd have to keep up with it, because the threats change and technology changes, and so things evolve very fast in that space. So if you're going to add value, you got to keep up with it. So for me, if I'm going to keep up with it, I might as well keep on working, right? So I've said no to all of that. So I'm not doing anything other than in doing what I want to do, So I would say the transition has been pretty easy. And I know it sounds like I'm keep beating the same drum, but we planned for it, Chris.
Yeah.
We planned. So we're not worrying where our next buck is coming from. You know what I mean? We're just doing what we want to do. But again, it's at the same lifestyle that where we began, right? So we attained it and we're maintaining it. And I think that's the important part. I'm not out blowing a lot of money, I'm not buying boats and stuff like that. Or places down south for more than I should be, right? So
right. But it seems like you're set up for success and you have a peaceful kind of easy way to retire without a lot of stress, because part of the reason why you leave the workforce is to have a freer lifestyle. And if you have a lot of pressure and stress about money, that doesn't sound like a great retirement, although lots of people do it or are forced into doing it. But you've been now benefiting from all those years of living beneath your means and building up some wealth and a nest egg for this chapter of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, it couldn't have been said better, Chris. It really comes down to planning. And to your point, stress-free. We're not worrying about where our next buck comes from.
Now you talked about income, and of course, we're not going to give out, confidential information, but I'm curious about this because I know as I work with clients and planning retirement, it sometimes is a challenge, Bill. And I want your thought on this is you have somebody that learns at an early age about, and it could be a later age. Okay, I'm going to put money away for my future. I'm going to save and invest, live beneath my means. You put the money in, you're committed to not to touch it. And you do a great job of that. You do that through maybe your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. And then the time comes that you retire. It's kind of weird to then take money out of accounts that you've never touched before, that you've built up, saved into, kept an eye on very carefully, almost like a mama bird watching the nest. And now it's time to take it out. For a lot of people, that is a really unusual experience. So I'm going to assume that you've tapped into your nest egg a little bit, some type of either withdrawals, income, that kind of thing. Did you find it odd when you began to take money out of some accounts that prior had been hands off?
Yeah, a little bit. I'll tell you. So we had, I'll call two nest eggs. We had one, what I'll call on-hand cash, right? So in my case, it was a lot of stock options and stuff like that I had gotten. So I've got that funding over there and cash. And then I've got my 401k, right? And so what we had planned, part of the plan was, the first couple of years of retirement, we're going to whack away at that on-hand cash, right? The stock option stuff. And we don't want to touch that 401k. Reason being is the way we got it planned out. After 65, 66 years old, we're both on Medicare, so we're on Medicare and all that type of stuff. And the kids are out of school and they're on their own. Like two are already there. I got one that's still in college once he gets out. But the plan is, and this is what we're talking about 3-4 years from now, the way it'll work is all that on-hand cash is gone. And what we'll have is we'll have the Social Security, we'll have the pensions, and all I need is 3%. All I need to do is make 3% of the 401k, and we're good to go to maintain our lifestyle. So that's kind of been the plan, right? But to your point, was it a little bit of adjustment? Yeah, but it's like it was part of the plan. So as I'm pulling out, it's okay. Now, if I had to tap into that 401k plan earlier, then I might have a little agita, But right now, I think we're going to be okay. We'll see what happens. Maybe I'll end up at Walmart selling T-shirts or something like that. But hopefully that's not the case. But right now, it looks like we're on plan.
Very good. And if you're listening to this, this sounds, and this is the lead up to the next question, Bill. It sounds like, oh my goodness, everything is perfect and neat and tidy, and it sounds ideal. But if you're like most people, including me, there's been notable money mistakes that I've made over the years, and I'm a certified financial planner. I've been immersed in this stuff. Can you give an example of any notable money mistakes you've made over the years, either as a younger person in the business world or maybe even later on? Any notable money mistakes you want to point to?
Sure. The money mistakes I made is when I was investing on my own, right? So those individual stocks, I got burned every time, right? So I was very unsuccessful. I'm much better letting the professionals, money managers, and what I mean by that is, I'm investing in mutual funds and things like that versus individual stock. I was like everybody else. Hey, Charlie told me about this company, and be it Wi-Fi, something that's new and shiny. And of course, you jump in it, and so I didn't do very well there. The times that I tried to invest into by myself, I've had much better success with the institutional type investments versus my own individual ones. So I always say that's probably where I made the mistake. But I think I was pretty lucky in other ways. I mean, we were very aggressive when we were young. I was in the Magellan Fund, the 20th Century Ultra Fund, and this is in the 80s and 90s. And we did very well, right? And then when I hit my 50s is when we started to turn the portfolio into more fixed income. And then over time, we tried our best to time the market. So a couple of years prior to, I forgot what the market was up to, is 20 something thousand or whatever. I thought, all right, hey, let's tap out there. It ended up going even higher than that, but you know how it goes. I mean, hey, we made our money. They always talk about pigs getting slaughtered. So, I want to be careful not to stay too risky for too long.
There you go. And last question. We talked about discipline and the plan and all of these positive virtues. You already touched on it when you told us you don't buy boats and you've been reluctant to overpay for real estate down south since retiring. But not being a free spender, is there anything that you do splurge on money-wise?
I will say vacations. So we do a lot of vacations, but for me, it really allows me for family time. So when we plan a vacation, everyone is there and they want to be there because we're going to a really nice place. And so that I think, you really make some memories there, right? So I would say, we've done Turks and Caicos and we've done Mexico. We're going to St. John's actually next week. I took all the kids and the family to the Philippines a few times. So, I think that's what we've spent time. I would say I would classify it as family time, but when you're on vacation, then you have their undivided attention. And so I think that's probably what we splurged on.
That's awesome. Very good. Well, Bill, I was excited about talking to you. We talk, off air, just in everyday lives. But I was looking forward to sitting down and kind of like in a concentrated way, kind of talking about some of this stuff, and you did not disappoint. So once again, thank you for the time and sharing with me and my audience some of your thoughts and the journey you've been on. It's very impressive. I'm glad you're having success, and you're an inspiration in terms of retiring because you've made it so easy. And it's great to see someone that worked so hard for so long get to enjoy the fruits of that in retirement. And it really is a model. So thanks for joining me today.
Hey, appreciate you having me. And again, thanks a lot, Chris.
Yeah, everyone, thanks for listening to today's episode. I'll be back with you on the next episode of the Simply Financial podcast very soon. In the meantime, subscribe to the show if you haven't done so already, the Simply Financial podcast. And I'll be back with you on the next episode soon.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.